Yes, hello, Joan. We're going to round up the first chapter today. I hope everything is working out well with you and your courses and your holiday job as well. Now we'll round up the first chapter, which was an introduction to making movies for environmental communication. We already talked of the grammar for many languages, one grammar for many languages when making films. Bringing the film into the classroom, film as an educational tool, film also as a learning tool. So we use film, we screen films to learn, but we also make films to acquire communication literacy, filmic literacy. So we have those two complementary sides, film as an educational tool and making films as a way of learning, because you don't only learn about film, you also learn about the content more in depth than reading. I think when you make a film on a subject and you read about the subject, there are two different things. By making the film, you learn a lot of content, but you also learn about communication. Then we've looked at the concept of sustainable development, the definition of sustainable development, the definition of sustainability, and the sustainable development goals, the 17 sustainable development goals. When making a film, you should look at which of the goals pertain to your film, which of the goals can you integrate in your film. And then we've looked at the education for sustainable development. Education, what sort of education should we engage in order to enable sustainable development? And we did talk about how do we realize this education for sustainable development? How do we realize that program? And we said that the best way would be to incorporate that program in almost any discipline that has to do with development or sustainable development. By incorporating it in almost every program or course of study, you would kind of like channel the course directly towards productive ends, particularly in schools like WPI here. I hope my voice is loud enough. So now we are going to look at narratives and channels for communication. So how do we apply communication? What sort of narratives and what sort of channels can we use? It's not going to be very long as the other one. It will be pretty short. And I think the notes I simplified the notes in a way that you will follow them very, very easily. Okay, understanding education for sustainable development, which is abbreviated as ESD. What is ESD? Education for Sustainable Development. It's a part of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and this is Goal 4, which promotes inclusive. When it comes to film, that term is very important. Inclusive, but also quality education and lifelong learning, education for sustainable development. Because sustainable development is so important, it has to be, learning about sustainable development has to be a lifelong thing, because we keep on developing, our society keeps on developing, and we have to align those two together. ESD combines basic education and learning about how to live sustainably, focusing on the relationship between society, the environment, and the economy. Those are the three sustainability pillars which we've worked on. So in society, learners gain understanding of democratic systems and social institutions, participation in decision making, the impact, effects on society of projects, STEM projects, all of that. In municipality, we did examine urban planning and we did see how decisions are being made in municipality, what care is being taken off in terms of society, the societal aspect, how does the society participate, or are they excluded? Then we talked about the environment, where learners develop awareness of natural resource use, environmental impacts, and the economy, where learners critically evaluate economic growth, which is being touted by almost every country. But we also examine consumption, because consumption, growth goes with consumption. Consumption grows, and so economy grows. And we look at the impact of both of these, economic growth and consumption, on social justice and on the planet. So you can see the relationship between economic growth, human consumption, the impact on wildlife, the impact on forestry, the impact on the seas. We talk about pollution, we've examined pollution very much in our classes, resource depletion, inequality, social justice, environmental justice, the impact on the planet. We've talked about the ecological footprint and the carbon footprint, and all of those. So all of that, we have to examine that in relation to the economy. How does the economy impact on those aspects which in the end might make life unsustainable, you know? Then look at the core features of education for sustainable development. What are the core features? I think in the last video we did discuss that a bit, and we say education for sustainable development, because development is such an ubiquitous field, almost like the air we breathe. Such education must be interdisciplinary. It must be integrated across disciplines, not treated as a separate topic. Once treated as a separate topic, the number of people learning it will be limited and it will seem unimportant. But because of its importance, overwhelming importance, education for sustainable development has to be integrated across subjects, across disciplines, and also it should drive your field. Most importantly, it should drive your field, no matter the discipline in which you are. It's values driven. It's based on shared values that are openly examined and applied. When we're educating for sustainable development, we're looking for shared values, because it's those shared values that will make us work together. When you're making a film, when you're doing research on your topic, you're also looking for shared values, because it's on the basis of those shared values that we can thrive, we can learn, we can thrive. Okay, education for sustainable development also has to be critical. It has to encourage problem solving and confidence in facing global challenges. Encouraging problem solving, because we're basically looking for solutions to environmental, economic, and social problems, and confidence in facing global challenges. So when doing your film, you have to orient your film towards problem solving, and you have to have confidence and generate confidence that those problems can be resolved. You know, when it's coming with despair, then that kind of circulates in the population. The tendency is that they give up. Okay, it has to be multi-method, using diverse teaching tools, for example, drama, debate, art, and all of that. And in your film, you also look how you can integrate those in your film wherever possible. Like drama, pay attention to drama when the actors are dramatizing, or they want to dramatize something in a village. If you're working in a village, and the village community, the cooperative, they want to dramatize something, that is very welcome. Debate, if they want to debate, that makes the film even more exciting. Art from children, you know, drawing the things, the topics that you're talking about, going to a school and students are drawing the trees in the village. Awesome. Okay, participatory, students help shape how they learn. So participatory learning is best when students help to shape how and what they learn. And that's one of the things I like about film. You are learning environment, and you're also learning about filmmaking. And in this course, I want you to help to shape how and what you learn. You know, you did ask me to make these videos, you know, to record them, and I'm happy to do that. So you are also participating. You know, it makes learning easier for you instead of me imposing my own way. No, we have to bring in a participatory approach where you, as the learner, you have a foothold in how you learn and in what you learn. So I become like an assistant, I become like a facilitator of learning. And when you're making a film, that's what that's the role you also play. You are a communicator, you become a facilitator of learning, an intermediary between the topic and the community with with whom you're making the film, and also the audience that will be watching the film. Education for sustainable development must be applicable. Learning should be useful in real life. It shouldn't be an end in itself. I think that one is clear. It should be locally relevant. It should connect local and global issues using familiar language and cultural concepts. So, making a film in Uganda, the US, it must connect globally. You're making a film in the US, people in Uganda should be able to follow the film. You're making a film in Uganda, people in the US should be able to follow the film, So you have to connect, and you use familiar language and cultural concepts. So, of recent, I've been trying to bring in a lot of African concepts in my writings. Sometimes I even have to translate my whole text in a language like Swahili, and I found out particular concepts in Swahili, in Hausa language in Africa, in Zulu, which I studied at school, and I speak Zulu and Xhosa in South Africa. I go deeper into those languages. I looked at environmental concepts, then I integrate them in my work, and that way I could bring in African communities, and at the same time I try to reach the global community. So take note of these characteristics of education for sustainable development. They're very important, and see how you can integrate them in your film. Why ESD isn't fully implemented yet, we did discuss that in the last few. Despite its importance, education for sustainable development isn't widely adopted in formal education systems. For example, here at WPI, we don't have education for sustainable development. We don't talk about it in the other courses, but we should. But we should, outside of environment and sustainability courses, which I teach, we should talk about education and sustainable development in other courses. It's often driven by grassroots efforts, NGOs, and local communities. That's another, it's been marginalized again and left. Education for sustainable development. It ought to engage everyone. It's not supposed to just be grassroots organizations, grassroots communities, NGOs, and local communities that are talking about education for sustainable development, or for whom that should be a concern. It should be a concern for informal education systems. It should be a concern for government. It should be a concern for societal institutions, broadly speaking. Broader adoption requires collaboration with scientists, because they do the research, and that research could be integrated in educational sustainable development. Environmental NGOs, because they work with the interface with community, so they do get a lot of knowledge and experience on environmental issues. Social enterprises, because they have a big role to play in education for sustainable development. Activist networks, trade unions, and media, because they have a powerful voice that can foster education for sustainable development. They can pass the message and actually influence advocacy in the education for the topics that are involved in education for sustainable development. The role of community in sustainability. What's the role of community in sustainability? To make sustainability education impactful, communication is key. Communication is key to make sustainable education have an impact. It makes ESD legitimate and trustworthy. Communication makes education for sustainable development to be legitimate, trustworthy. It helps navigate complex, uncertain environmental issues. We already discussed in the first class about the nature of environmental issues. There are simple environmental issues, simple problems that can be solved. There are also complex environmental issues, and there are wicked environmental issues. Wicked environmental issues is an issue like climate change. Complex environmental issues, we could talk about providing fresh water to communities, freshwater infrastructure. It's complex because of the nature of water, and then infrastructure as well. Simple environmental issues, we do have simple environmental issues. That's one-stop solutions that are not. So because because we have simple, complex, uncertain, and wicked issues, then that's where education for communication. That's where communication becomes key. Communication helps us to understand the nature of these problems and sometimes to have patience to draw in the community so that they bring in all the resources possible, have all hands on board to examine particularly wicked problems that cannot be solved easily by one person. Often wicked problems are problems that are beyond complex, which means too many actors are involved at the local level, at the global level, and sometimes solve if a wrong solution complicates the problem. And some of those wicked problems, they can only be modified, not completely eliminated. Issues like atmospheric pollution, because we have airlines flying, we have shipping lines, we have industries. So long as we have those, there will always be atmospheric pollution. So what we can do is to mitigate, through particular measures, mitigate atmospheric pollution below a certain level. Environmental communication is a key field that studies how media influences our views of nature. It emphasizes that even non-environmental content like arts and films can shape environmental attitudes indirectly. Adverts and films, they shape environmental attitudes. If you look at adverts, sometimes they can be pro-environment, sometimes they can be against the environment, and also films can very much they have a very, very strong role in communicating environmental messages, or on the contrary, they can also do the same. So environmental communication, adverts, films, and other media which we'll examine, they're very, very crucial. How do we use this media to pass environmental messages? How do you use adverts? How do you use film? Then how we value nature. So now we're going to look at how humanity values nature. And we have already examined some of this before. We talked about there are some people that focus on ecocentric values. That's on ecological values. They focus a lot on ecological values. And so when they're passing a bill, they focus on the ecological side of the bill. How does it protect ecosystems? And anthropocentric views, human-centered views. Also have this other group that is focused on the human benefits, the economic benefits of the environment, and sometimes they may not focus that much on, they may not give much value to the environment itself. Okay, so we have ecocentric, nature has value in itself beyond human use. Anthropocentric, nature is valuable mainly because it helps humans. These ideas, they exist on a broad spectrum. You can't split humanity into ecocentric and anthropocentric. It's difficult, but there is a spectrum there, and you see this spectrum in policies that are being passed by each government, whether the US government and the Ugandan government, and it depends on which government is in power. Sometimes they focus on different values. So we have instrumentalism, which deals with unlimited use of nature for humans. So in this spectrum, we may have this group, this tendency, where some people may see nature, they may see unlimited use of nature for humans. It means humans can use nature without limits, exploit nature without limits, deplete it, no limits. That is very, very dangerous. Then we have conservationism. Conservationism, these big terms, when they start bringing these big terms like Sean, isms, and centric, I don't like these big terms. I preferred a term like instrumental uses of nature. Instrumental, so you use nature like an instrument. Conservative uses of nature, which means you are conservative, you are careful, you are utilitarian, because you use it carefully, but still mostly for human, utilitarian. Then you have preservationists. Preservationists protect nature for its own beauty, science, and culture. I'll give you an example. There used to be parks in Africa where humans can't step in. If you step in, you get shot. There used to be forests in Uganda during colonial times, and the British they outlawed some forests. And during that time, the forest will grow like 10 years, 5, 10 years, and then the British, they harvest the forest for their own uses. But also, we also have, so there are areas that are out of bounds and parks that are out of bounds. People don't go there. They might have been damaged so much that, or they might have some rare species. And so we do have areas like this, which we have millionaires and billionaires buying in Africa, small parks. They just buy them and they put them out of bounds to the public. And so they let particular species in those parks grow. In the Amazon, we also have Europeans, millionaires or billionaires, that are buying areas of the Amazon in Brazil and just to fence it and protect the biodiversity for the future. That's preservationism. There used to be much of it during the colonial times, but then conservationism came in and replaced preservationism. Then we have ethical values. All life forms have intrinsic worth. This was Aldo Leopold. Aldo Leopold, we studied him in the first lesson. He was the one that said all forms of life have intrinsic worth, and that was a biocentric approach. Aldo Leopold also brought about the ecocentric approach. Meanwhile, preservationism, it was Edwin Muir, which is in our introductory text. Edwin Muir, we also studied about him. And then finally, we have transformational ideologies that seeks radical changes to nature relationships. Nature relationships, there are our relationships with nature, our relationships with the natural environment, with the ocean, the seas, the trees, the forests, with wildlife. So transformational ideologies, the ideologies that seek very, very radical changes to our relationships. You have these tree huggers, those people that hug trees, and fighting the police to protect. And it's a lot of it here in the U.S., in the Northwest, in Oregon, and also in Atlanta. There is a forest in Atlanta that they want to demolish the forest to build training facilities for the police force. And there are lots of young people fighting against that because it was indigenous territory and the place used to be a prison and it used to be a slave farm. So the whole history of the place stinks with the environmental injustice. And we have these young people fighting. The forest is a park. They're fighting that the forest should not be used for any. So we have those tree huggers, and most of them converged. Most of them converged to in Atlanta to fight it. Communication strategies for sustainability. So what are the strategies that you could use in communication for sustainability? We have social marketing. You know a lot about social marketing. You probably see a lot of ads online, and when you see those ads, pay attention. Pay attention to how they are made. Those clips that relate to environment, you can learn a lot from those clips on environment. So that's social marketing. Advocacy, pushing for policy change. If you're doing a film on Uganda, you can advocate through that film that policy should be changed. Air pollution, resource depletion. Making aeronautic plane parts that are not they don't leave a high carbon footprint. We have information campaigns as well. Is it Nakate? Is it Victoria? It's her name, Victoria Nakate. Information campaigns. She does information campaigns where she tries to fill in knowledge gaps on gender and environment and the impact of northern countries on climate change in the south, while the southern countries, they produce less carbon dioxide, but they bear much of the burden. She's been doing a lot of work providing knowledge gaps, and now she's doing her master's in Oxford University and working more in that direction in order to be able to provide more knowledge gaps and to be a strong advocate. And then we have information, education, and communication educates mass audiences. IEC, information, education, communication, those three. Information, education, communication educates mass audiences. So that's a part of communication strategies. Education and training, skill building, and interactive teaching. We have education and training going on by environmental NGOs in Africa, also here in the US, I think, I don't know, the NGO you're working with, does it deal with that? Education and training. And then we have institutional dimension, improving on organizational image and capacity. Improving on organizational image and capacity. Those are organizations that work on environmental and environment sustainability and development issues. Improving on their image, improving on their capacity to deliver. Then we have community mobilization, which involves locals in solving the environmental issues that they are facing. And I think any film that we make anywhere, it has to engage community in solving environmental issues. Like when the first assignment I did give was about air pollution here, sensitivity to air pollution. And I think you wrote a very, very good essay on that. So how do you mobilize the community in solving these problems? Then we have participatory dialogue. Participation there is a very, very strong, very, very good term, very, very strong term that it's very, very crucial. Fosters consensus-driven change which is driven by consensus, by broad agreement, broad agreement among actors. So when you look at all these elements, all these aspects, each has a different purpose and is useful for a different it's useful for a different goal. Okay, then we look at using participatory videos in sustainable education. Participatory videos, participation is very, very important. We did look at different kinds of films, observational films, participation, and then fiction and all of that. And with participatory is the one that we basically use most of the time in environmental filmmaking. There's observational environmental filmmaking, wildlife filmmaking, which is not participatory, it's mostly observational. But since if we're dealing with human communities, with environmental issues that are social and economic, we mostly do participatory videos. Participatory videos involve students and communities in making their own films to express ideas, raise awareness, and push for action. This form of learning is hands-on and community-driven. So making their own films, so they own the film. When you do a film with the community, and the ownership, it's between you, the community, and donors. That makes the film more powerful. It makes the end product, it makes the ideas, the proposals that you bring at the end to be acceptable when you have broad participation. In that sense, it's not top-down. It's not top-down. It's kind of like horizontal. We work on a horizontal plane rather than top-down. You impose the film on the community. It's your voice that they hear in the film. No, it should be horizontal, where we hear the voices of different actors. They are given space, gender, age, and all those categories. They come in, we hear their voices. Then in that sense, those different groups that they represent, they can own the film. And so there are 3 goals when using participatory videos in sustainability education. 1, raising awareness. Students learn and teach. 2, empower people through storytelling and advocacy. Storytelling is the most powerful medium for change, because humans, unlike animals, humans have the power of language, and through this language, they tell stories. Stories here is not literature. Stories here, the stories we talk about science, the stories we talk about AI, stories we talk about engineering. Through those stories, we pass knowledge, scientific knowledge, STEM knowledge. Knowledge is best when passed through storytelling. Action, skills, planning, and media impact. Participatory videos, so they have to be focused on action. One of the final goal has to be action. We learn skills, we plan, and all of that is directed towards making the media to have an impact. Steps to use media for communicative education. What are the steps to use when media for environmental education? What are the steps to use when you are using media for environmental education? You're producing a film for environmental education. What are the steps? The first step is research. You have to define your goals. You have to define your goals. You have to define the objectives. and demands based on local needs. You have to determine the local needs using the SMART framework. We're going to look at the SMART framework at the end. You must include diverse voices in your film and understand your audience's values. You must include diverse voices in your film. That's participatory approach. And understand your audience values. Once you include diverse voices and understand their values, then they own the film, and then they'll be best placed to also own the change process. Production. You have to create meaningful collaborative content using storytelling and film. So you create meaningful collaborative content using storytelling and film. This demands a lot of knowledge on shooting and editing, because you have to focus on meaningful content, which you obtain through collaboration. Distribution. Use platforms like social media, film festival to share your work. So if you produce your film here, there are film festivals going on in the US, there are film festivals going on in Africa, the capital cities. You sometimes have continental film festivals, sometimes you have national film festivals. You have to go to schools to screen your film. You go to schools to screen your film. You go to communities, youth groups, NGOs, attend festivals to screen their film, because through festivals, your film gets highlighted internationally and globally. And so it helps with distribution of your film. Impact. A good campaign spreads awareness, motivates change, and garners public and political support for sustainability. So that has to be, you have to focus on impact. So you have this triangle: awareness, knowledge, people-centered advocacy, and capacity for action. People-centered advocacy, capacity for action. Those are the three legs of participatory video. And here you have strategic and collective action and strategy. Strategic and collective action, as it's not well written. So integrating education for sustainable development. How do you integrate it? You identify through research and voicing, giving voice, to the participants in your film, the different actors, to environmental concerns, and you turn this into concrete demands. So you complete and you complete your video. Once you identify the research, you identify voices, environmental concerns, you turn them into concrete demands in your completed film or video. Then you move to distribution and the public screening, social media, and AVOD streaming content. Structural change, those are the expectations now. Public policy and environmental legislation, cultural change, awareness change, engaging your audiences to action. So this gives you a summary of of communication and intention and your plan of action. It has to follow strategic and collective action and strategy. That's planning and production, and then you move to distribution, and then the change that you expect. So when making a film, you have to examine these three aspects. What sort of research are you doing? Whom would you give voice in your film? What are the environmental concerns? How will you turn this into concrete demands? And then distribution, how will you distribute your film? What modality, what channels are you going to use? And what change do you want to bring about in these three arenas: public policy, environmental legislation, cultural change, awareness, and engaging your audiences? You have to, as you contemplate your film, you have to bring this in. And I think this ends the first chapter, and this gives you a strong background now as we step into storytelling, the role of storytelling in making STEM fields. When you read this chapter here, it doesn't focus on STEM. It focuses a little on acted documentaries, acted environmental documentaries. But we are not working on acted environmental documentaries. We're working on participatory environmental documentaries where you go and you shoot in the field. You organize people, you tell them about participation, what you expect, how you're doing the film, and then they take over, and then you become a filmmaker working with them you know. Acted films, they're acted documentaries, but that's not what I find out that the author is like not really clear in defining acted documentaries and participatory documentaries, which are much more spontaneous, so long as you already engage the audience on the goals of the film, what you expect, and the outcomes that you expect, and then you bring them in. In that sense, it's less acted, it's much more spontaneous. Things unfold as they go, but participation there becomes the key. So go through the chapter 1 closely, and then for your assignment, you have to think about what film you're going to make and see how you incorporate this aspect. Evaluate the film, see how you incorporate this aspect, and then I think we'll go on to outlining your film in terms of storytelling, storyboarding, brainstorming to get details of the film, how you could do it, and then we'll go into storyboarding and then shooting and then editing. So I'll end here. If you have any issues, do let me know. I hope I'll be able to upload this without much problem. Okay, you take good care, and if there is any issue, don't hesitate to let me know. I'm here to make sure that you have the best of this course and that the skills and the knowledge you use it not just now, but when you graduate, and any corporation with which you work, you should be able to take care of issues that relate to the environment, climate change, urban planning, and also film producing documentaries in those particular areas, and or even other areas too. Once you already know how to do these environmental films, you could even make highly technical films on aeronautics, on airports, to educate communities on different aspects, or specialists in that particular field, working in aeronautic engineering across the world, so that they could see those things. Once you have these skills, you can apply them almost any field that any social activity that you are very, very interested in. Okay, thanks so much. So I'll end here and then try to wrap up and send it to you.